Hi guys, it's Emily from Novel Novels and welcome to today's video. This is my top books of 2022. Now, this year for the first time ever I've managed to get it down to 15 books. But because it's 15 I won't go into too much detail, but I will talk about the books. Now there is one classic on this, but to be honest, and one fantasy, but to be honest, most of the books on this list are historical fiction. But should that surprise you? I do actually find it quite hard to rate contemporaries, and to rate them 5 stars means they must be absolutely amazing. And I found it really hard to find a contemporary that really stands out as one that I would like to reread. Now, in my 2022 wrap up, I have spoken about Heidi Swain being a new top author, but all of her books are series books, and apart from one. There is only one series book, but that's like a trilogy book that I've counted in this pile. But normally, again, I try not to count them. This is the first year that Page Toon has not been on this list, and that's because she's not had a new release out in 2022, but she has got one in 2023. So I'm looking forward to seeing if she remains a favourite and see how that does. I'm like setting you guys a challenge. What books do you think will be in my top 3 or top 5 books? See if you can predict any in my order, any books that you think would be in the top 5. And most of all, can any of you predict what book that you know that I've read will be as my favourite book of the year so far? I would love to know. Let me know down below if you predicted any of the order of my books, any of the ratings, any books you know are going to be in this video. The girls on my book waffle, I expect you to at least predict one book in this top 10 at least. But I would love to see how you do. I'm doing it in reverse order. So I'm going to do the top 15 like in reverse order. But let me know down below if you want to stop and think what books do you think are going to be in the top 5, or if you want to wait for a little bit and pause it when I get a bit closer, let me know. So the book that I rated as 15th is my one classic in this list, and that is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. I read this for October and I thoroughly loved it. It was one that I really struggled with classics in 2022, but this is one that I really stood out to me as amazing, and it's actually surprised me how much I love Wilkie Collins. I've had a bit of hit and miss with him because I liked Arnadale, but I loved this and I loved The Moonstone. And this was about The Woman in White. But mainly you've got different sort of chapters being different narrators. Marion Halcombe is definitely my favourite narrator. And you've just got so many good people in this. And there's Walter Hargreaves, I think he was really great. I thoroughly loved this. And it's one that I can't wait to reread at some point. Now, safe to say, this is the one author that I've actually duplicated. So you know at some point there's going to be another book by this author that's going to be in this list. But I had to include this. Firefly Lane by Kristen Hannah was amazing. It was one that made me sob my heart out. I do not like the reconstruction that's been put on Netflix. But it's about 2 girls, Kate Malarkey and Tully Hart. And they start off at friends at the start of this book when they're teenagers in the 60s. And it carries on till the end of the 80s. There was a sequel to this, Fly Lane, which I did enjoy, but not as much as this. And like I said, this broke me into pieces. Their friendship was incredible. Their writing is stunning. And to be honest, I will never forget this. And it's actually one that I've kept. I've kept this and Fly Lane. And potentially, I will say, Kristen Hannah is a new favourite author, which I think was spoken about in my wrap-up part 1. But definitely amazing book. I'm trying to put this on piles. Now, a book that surprised me for its rating, which is rating number 13, and that's Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. I've only got one more Sarah Waters to read, which I can't remember the life of me what it's called, but it's down there somewhere. I think The Little Stranger I still need to read, but again, Sarah Waters has been quite hit or miss, but this was amazing. It's set in the Victorian times, it's set in the Victorian music halls of London. And it's very saucy. This is probably one of the raunchiest books I've read. LGBTQI+ mentions. It's brilliantly written. It follows the glittering career of Nan King, oyster girl turned music hall star turned rent boy for the East End Tom. It is incredible. It was a book that I couldn't put down, and one that I've absolutely loved. So definitely would recommend Sarah Waters. Again, she's been very hit and miss, but I think that's the first of her books that's actually gone on my favourites. Now to another author that's one of my favourite authors, and that is Bridget Kemner's Forging Silver into Stars. I did like Defend the Dawn, which was another release. She had 2 new releases this year. There was this and Defend the Dawn, and this is the start of a new series for her, so that's why I'm kind of counting this. And it's a series that's sort of tallied slightly away from the Cast So Dark and Lonely series. This is about, it's still set in Sail Shallow, and it's got Jax and his best friend Kaylin, and it's got Lord Tycho, who was in the Curse of Dark and Lonely series, and it's romance and it's magic, and we've got my favourite character Grey in it. And you know I've got a crush on Grey. Grey is my book crush, and it's newfound love, it's dark fates, and it's all connected. And to be honest, I can't wait to read this series. I do like the Defy the Night series, which is Defy the Night and Defend the Dawn, but I didn't like it as much as I like this. This was incredible. This was one of my favourites. Yet again, I've still got a cold. This was incredible. If you like YA fantasy, this is brilliant. If you love the Curse of Dark and Lonely series, this is one I thoroughly recommend. So Forging Silver into Stars was my book that was rated number 12. It's not quite in the top 10 because the top 10 is very, very tough. Let's go downstairs. Now, to one of my first books of the year in 2022. There's another book that was from the start of the year in 2020. January had one of the best months. I Had to Knock Us Three by Ruth. Oh, I'm just telling you that. By Ruth Hogan. Oh, no, not Ruth Hogan. Ruth something or other. I had to knock Us Three off there because it didn't quite, like, when I kept reading this year. But this was one. It was the winner of the Women's Prize for 2020. Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Again, Maggie O'Farrell has been very hit and miss with me. I loved this. This was like literally a standout, amazing book for me. But I've not liked all of her books, and I've actually DNF'd quite a few. So I'm hoping if the next book she creates is kind of along these amazing lines. Now, this is the story of Hamnet. We all know about Hamnet. He was William Shakespeare's son. But this isn't as much about Hamnet as I would have thought. And William Shakespeare is not actually named in this book. But it's more about Hamnet, and Hamnet is the twin brother is one of William Shakespeare's twins, and he dies. We know this at the start of the book. He dies. But a lot of this story is actually told from Agnes, Hamnet's mum, her point of view, and Hamnet's older sister who survived. And it's so good. But I love Agnes's tale more. I love Agnes. I love the fact that Agnes would do anything for her children, and she's a feisty mum, and she is just absolutely incredible. And this is a book that will ultimately always stand out to me as absolutely incredible. I love the writing in this. I love the way they didn't discuss Shakespeare's name. The writing is incredible. The chapters are brilliant. This was a standout, well and truly great start to the year. I wonder if 2023 I'm going to start the year with any favourites. As of the day of filming this on the 3rd, I've not yet had a 5-star. But I'm very early on. But this one had a lot to live up to, so that was amazing. Then to one of the most recent books I read this year, and it's I think it's my only non-fiction book, and that's Dear Reader by Cathy Rensenbrink. It is one of Alice from Alice's Giant Bookshelf's favourite books, and I saw why. She gave this to me for my birthday, and oh my god, I love this book. I absolutely loved it. It has a book about books, but it also has her story, Cathy Rensenbrink's story. And I want to read another book by Cathy Rensenbrink because I believe that's her story about her brother, who we know early on. But this has book recommendations in it. I've picked up so many book recommendations from this book, and it's one I will read. But it's her story about how she became a reader and what books have had a part of her journey. And it made me buy a few books. Like I said, let's see if there's any books on here. It does talk about amazing authors. We've got My Brilliant Friend by Eleanor Ferrante. I've still got that on my shelves. I need to read that. That's one that sort of stands out here. We've got 26A by Diana Evans. I've already picked that up. This is great for recommendations, but it is dangerous for the old wallet. But it's a brilliant book about a book lover. And I love books about fellow readers, and this is absolutely incredible. So that's going downstairs again. Now to another book that I read quite early on in the year, and this is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was a stunning book. It's one I absolutely loved. It's gorgeous. I think my sister Charlie bought it for me, but it's one of the most gorgeous hardbacks. Taylor Jenkins Reid did not disappoint me in this book. And this is apparently, there's a character in this that's actually going to be in Carrie Soto's Back, which is a book that I may have bought this month already. On the day of Nina Rivers' annual end of summer party, it's basically about the River siblings, Nina, Jay and Hud, and Kit. And it's their story, but it's told over like 24 hours, but it does go back to how their family started off. And the writing of this is incredible. It's Taylor Jenkins Reid, in my opinion, one of their best books. It isn't as good as The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which you all know was one of my favourite books of the year last year. But yet again, Taylor Jenkins Reid has got a book that is in my top books of the year so far, even though if it only just... Oh no, it is on number 9, so it's actually in the top 10, which is really good. Excuse me, I struggle with this cold. But this was a book that really didn't disappoint. Malibu Rising was one I really loved. Can Carrie Soto Gets Back? That's going to be a book that I bought in December. I will definitely read towards the end of this year, but will that get into my top books of 2023? I'm wondering if any of these authors are going to be back. I do think Bridget Kemener's probably going to have a new release out at some point, so I know she will. I wonder if any of these other ones are going to be back in it. Now, book number 8 is a book that was absolutely broke me again, and that's Three Sisters by Heather Morris. I got this in hardback. It's now out in paperback, and my mum got it for me, and I didn't read it till again later in the year. But it is about 3 sisters. You know me and books on 3 sisters. I loved it. It's set mainly in Auschwitz, but it is more than that, and I think that's what I loved about 3 Sisters. I think this, to me, is better than Silka's Journey. I've read this, Silka's Journey, and The Tattooist of Auschwitz, and The Stories of Hope, which is a short story collection. This is kind of alongside. It's joint, if not favourite, to Tattooist of Auschwitz, but it's way better than Silka's Journey. So if you didn't like Silka's Journey as much, this is one that stands out to me. And it really is about 3 sisters, and basically one of them gets straight away called to Auschwitz, and then another sister decides to go with her automatically, and then the middle sister is actually in hospital at the time, so she does end up in Auschwitz, but not for very long. So it's about their journey, but it's not just about Auschwitz, it's about their journey, and they survived it and how they came out. I believe this is actually true story as well as fiction. It's a mixture of fiction and non-fiction, which is very much atypical of Heather Morris's writing. And at the end, we found out what actually happened to the girls, and they all survived, obviously, that's safe to say. But they did have a tough journey. But this book is absolutely incredible. But it is one to warn you that will break you. You still have one to go downstairs. Then book number 7 is one of my only contemporaries, and I think this is actually my highest rating contemporary. Yeah, no, there's one more. It's kind of contemporary. Yeah, it's one of my highest rating contemporaries, and that's Beth O'Leary's The No Show. Beth O'Leary does have another book that's coming out at the end of the year, and I will certainly buy that. Beth O'Leary, again, never disappoints. I've loved all of her books, and The No Show was, again, really stand out. To me, I know that Ange didn't like this as much, but God. Basically, there are 3 women that are supposed to be meeting this one man, and there are so many twists and turns of this that you do not expect. You've got Siobhan, who is meeting Joseph at 8:52 for a breakfast break. Miranda, who is meeting Carter at 12:43, and at 6:30, Joseph Carter is meeting Jane. Obviously, my middle name's Jane, so I love the Jane's character. And actually, I really like Jane's character out of all of them. But they all have their different journeys, and I was like, oh no, not the cheating trope again. And there is a bit of that, but it's so much more than that, and all 3 characters have got their own journeys, and it is just an absolutely incredible book, and she just does not disappoint. I love Beth O'Leary's works. I think this is better than The Road Trip. The Road Trip wasn't my favourite of hers. I love The Switch. The Switch is my favourite book. I love The Flat Chair, which I'm rereading in February. I'm actually listening to that on audiobook. To me, at the moment, I think, excuse me, I think to me this is the switch, and then probably the no-show, and then the flat share, and then the road trip. But again, this was incredible and I absolutely loved it. Let's go downstairs to book number 4, and then we're in the top, no, to book number 6, and then we're in the top 5, and that is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. I wasn't sure if this was going to be my top 10. In fact, it very nearly didn't get my top 10. And then suddenly, when I thought about it, I rated it number 6. So it obviously had done something really big. And I think that's because this story stayed in my head. It's one I've not been able to get out of my head. And we all know that this bit about this book, it was won the Women's Prize book. It was in the Booker Prize. It won so many, it got close to winning so many Met Awards. I Was Born to Be a Wanderer. And this is about Marion Graves, who is always marked by lust, and this is her story, but it's also got the story of Hallie Baxter, who half a century later is playing her in a film, and it's about her final journey. This is a lot more hard-hitting than I thought it was going to be. It's a very hard-hitting book, but it's one that, for me, I think, like I said, it stayed in my head. Look at that, okay, look at that hardback. God, what is it with me and hardbacks at the moment? There's actually a lot of hardbacks are in this book, in this series. Which is good, because that means I've obviously spent more money. So I did get this in the charity shop for £2. But this was one I haven't been able to get out of my head. It's historical fiction. It was one that was obviously fantastic because it's been so close to winning awards, and it's one that I've loved. So, now to my top 5. I'm already aware of how long this video is. But can any of you predict which books are in this top 5? Let me know down below if you have. At number 5, and this is the book that was that came in the top 10, and it ended up being in the top 5. It's one of my last books I read in 2022, and that's The Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley-Hellier. You would have heard about it in my December wrap-up part 1. It is one that's, again, it jumped out at me. I did not expect this to be my favourites of the year, but it really has. It's mainly set over, again, about 24 hours, I believe. On a perfect August evening, Elle Bishop heads out for a swim in the pond by the Paper Palace, the family's home in Cape Cod. As she dives beneath the water, she really lives the passionate encounter that she had the night before against the side of a house that knows all her darkest secrets. And it's over 24 hours and 50 years, and it's Elle's story. Again, this is very, very hard-hitting. It's not one to be read gently, but it's one to be read and absorbed and really thought about. And it's one that I believe it's kind of contemporary-ish. But it's a mixture of contemporary and historical fiction. I would love to know. But again, it was a book that really stood out to me. And for it to jump in this high up, for being one of the last books I read this year, in 2022, sorry, it was saying something. And this was absolutely incredible. And I thoroughly, thoroughly loved it. Loved it, but it was, again, very much wanted to break me. And a book that a lot of you are going to predict being in my top 10. Apparently, I bought it quite cheap on Amazon, but apparently I could have got it a lot cheaper in paperback, but I was prepared to pay for it. And that's Careless by Kirsty Capes. Again, this got close to winning so many awards, and it should have been higher in the Women's Prize. And this is the story of, set in the 80s. Again, it's had mixed reviews. Okay, sorry, me and the hardback. At 3:00, Fearless, Motherless and Careless. At 3:04 on a hot sticky day in June, Bess finds out she's pregnant. She could tell her social worker Henry, but he's useless. She could tell her foster mother Lisa, but she won't understand. She ought to tell Boy, but she hasn't spoken to him in weeks. The friendship in this is one between Bess and her best friend. Oh my god, that is one of the best friendships that I've ever read about. And this is about Careless, which is a coming-of-age novel like no other, celebrating female friendship and enduring hope to follow our dreams against all odds. And that really is it. It's inspiring, it's amazing. The friendship that Bess has with her best friend is probably one of the best friendships I've ever read. And I loved it. I thought it was one of the... It's just stand out to me as such an amazing book. And that's number 5. That's number 4. And that tells you, to get to this level in the books I've read this year has been absolutely incredible. And I loved it. Now to number 3. Now these next top 3 could easily jump around positions. Certainly the top between 2 and 3, the 2 positions could really have jumped around. They've jumped around so many times. And one of them was literally the first book I read this year, and that was the winner of the Booker Prize 2020, and that was Shaggy Bane. We all knew this was going to be in my top list as a book. I'm surprised if I think all of you would have known that. I read this and Young Mungo, and Young Mungo was too hard-hitting. I didn't enjoy that as much, but this was incredible. It's one of Angie's Book Chatter's favourite book ever, and she rereads it every January. And it's one I will reread, but not yet, because it is very, very hard-hitting. Shaggy Bane is about Agnes, about literally the character of Shaggy Bane. Everyone knows about Shaggy Bane. It's one of the most popular books ever. And this was sort of set in the early 80s in Glasgow. It's very, very, very hard-hitting. Agnes Bane was always expecting more. In Glasgow in the early 80s, she dreamed of greater things. And then she's got 3 children. And Shaggy Bane is the one that holds out the longest. It's her son, and he is so loyal to her despite everything. She's an alcoholic, and there's a lot of other obstacles. They have money issues, alcoholism, gender issues, so many different issues in this book that are so hard hitting, but it is such an amazing book, and it's one that's stayed in my head for so long. Then number 2, one that gained a new release, Miss England by Stacey Hawes. Stacey Hawes is another author who every one of her books have been in my favourites. The Familiars I loved, this I loved, The Foundling I did enjoy. The Familiars was always my favourite, but this is very close to becoming my favourite. In fact, I think it actually beats The Familiars, and The Familiars is now second. The Foundling I didn't like as much, but this was hand on my heart, amazing. It is about Mrs. England who, it's like historical fiction, but it's also, I didn't care that I paid out full price for this, because again, look at that. I know I'm doing it again, but this is set in West Yorkshire in 1904. When newly graduated nurse Ruby May takes a position looking after the children of Charles and Lillian England, a wealthy couple from a powerful dynasty of Milan, and she hopes it will be the fresh start she needs. But as she adapts to life in the isolated Hardcastle house, it becomes clear that something is not right. And above there, and it's just, oh my god, it's a mystery, thriller, historical fiction, all in one. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous book, and I thoroughly loved it. There was no way it was going to be in my top 3, but yeah, there's only one favourite book of the year so far, and it was one I read with Danny, and it's The Four Winds by Kristen Hannah. You all know this was going to be my favourites of the year so far, and I just can't stop thinking about it. The lead character in this, I've been told, is like me, because she's very feisty. She'll do anything for her kids, and I would certainly do anything for mine. It's set in 1934 in the Great Plains, and it's about the Great Drought there in thingy, and it's about America's Great Depression and the Dust Bowl in 1930s. It was near, I don't know, a huge amount. I read East of Eden, which again was set in similar times, and I thought that was amazing, and this was incredible. Elsa would do anything for her kids, and they go off on a journey to try and be safe, and oh my god, it's just amazing. And she fights so hard for her kids, and this is Kristen Hannah's best book ever in my opinion. It really does talk about, and a lot of what happened in this book really did happen to people at this time. It is very hard hitting again, very emotional, but so good, and one I will never forget. So, did you predict what books were in my favourites? Are there any books what's your favourite book of 2022? Let me know down below. I'd love to get recommendations for you of books that I should look for in 2023. And I hope this is the last sort of reflective video. And obviously going forward, let's hope, I wonder what books are going to be in my top 3 for 2023. I wonder if I'm going to have any new favourite authors. Who knows what 2023 is going to bring. But I'm so looking forward to it. And again, thank you all so much for 2022. You're all absolutely amazing. Take care. Bye. Oh, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, not subscribed, ring on my ding-a-ling. I think I forgot to do that in a few videos. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.